All right, tell me if you hear it.
All right, everybody, we're gonna try this one more time.
And if it works, I'll
Okay, perfect.
In the spring of 1944, the Nazis attend an unusual performance of Verdi's Requiem. The choir and their conductor
It is really
are all
quiet.
prisoners in the concentration camp Terezin. The inmates of Terezin channel the darkest of human experience into an explosion of art and music, and they would use it to defy the Nazis.
Doing a performance was not entertainment. It was a fight for life.
It was something which made us strong. It is the reason why we are calling it culture resistance. It has given us a resistance against our fate.
We just tried to reach something that's bigger than we are. And let's hope that we are singing to God, and God can't help but hear us.
Now, a new choir brings the Requiem back to Terezin, and the story of this artistic uprising to life.
Here they were, surrounded on an hourly basis by man's worst, and these Jewish prisoners and the creative people here were determined to remind everyone of man's best. And I brought the Verdi here because I want to assure these people that I've heard them. Now, we have to tell the people of the unmarked graves that we've heard them.
In a small town in the Czech Republic, a warehouse is being prepared for a reawakening. Tomorrow, American conductor Murray Sidlin will stage a special performance, a tribute to a prison chorus and to another conductor, Raphael Schechter, who led them in an extraordinary rebellion.
Ever since I learned what happened here and the extraordinary artistic statement that Schechter and his chorus decided they were going to make, I thought that it would be the right thing to honor not only him, but all those who sang and all those who listened, and to reawaken all these walls with the sounds of the Verdi, which have not been heard here for a long, long time.
Prague, 1941. Musician Raphael Schechter is preparing for a journey. Where he is going, he has no idea. Hitler's Nazi empire has swallowed up the city, one of Europe's most vibrant cultural capitals.
It started that we had to wear the star. If you were found without it, you would be punished by being deported.
At 29 years old, Raphael Schechter has established himself in Prague as a talented pianist and conductor. But under the Nazis, Jews are banned from the arts, ejected from schools, and confined to their homes by an evening curfew. The city's famed theaters and concert halls fall silent. And in November of 1941, the Nazis lower the curtain on Jewish life in Prague.
Started filtering news that they are making lists of Jewish families and they'll be sent somewhere.
The Nazis force all Jewish families to pack up their lives and limit them to 50 kilos of luggage, 110 pounds selected from a lifetime. Raphael Schechter takes the things that give his life meaning, the tools of his trade, piano scores, including Giuseppe Verdi's Requiem Mass. At 5 a.m. on a November morning, Schechter and hundreds of Czech Jews board the first train into the unknown.
We came to the station, and there were already a lot of people and old ones and children crying and pushed into a train, and off we went. Had no idea where we were going.
The train carries them just 40 miles west of Prague to an old garrison town transformed into a new Jewish prison camp, Theresienstadt, Terezin. The town is selected by the man charged with rounding up Europe's Jews, Nazi Lieutenant Colonel Adolf Eichmann. With only a half square mile in area, confined by a high wall, the old fortress would serve as a ready-made holding pen for the Czech Jews.
The train stopped at a small place called Bohušovice, and from there we walked endless country roads, 2 by 2, with all our luggage.
And when we all went through the gates, I knew that life will never be the same.
The Nazi guards strip all new arrivals of cash and valuables and any semblance of normal life. Children are seized from their parents, husbands and wives separated into bunks for men and women. Raphael Schechter carves out a space for himself in the rafters of an old house. The day after his arrival, Schechter is assigned to a construction detail, forced to work up to 100 hours a week. Jewish artists are drafted to produce Nazi propaganda. But at night, with hidden supplies, they risk their lives to secretly record the horrors around them.
The moment you open your eyes, the struggle began. And of course, the struggle for the day by day trivial needs, like wash yourself, reach the latrines. We have been converted from regular people to inmates.
The German slogan at the camp is, "Work will make you free." But refusal to work means a brutal incarceration in the nearby small fortress, where inmates are tortured and executed. For everyone else in Terezin, the constant hunger is a torture all its own.
Of course, there was no food. There wasn't more than maybe a cupful like this, and some of it was just some kind of watery beets or whatever, but the food that we swallowed, it was never quite enough.
Who of us worked in the kitchen? We could have a little bit more food than just one potato and one ladle of soup. But I remember the old people were standing in the line for hours and would say, please, from the bottom, so that there will be something, a piece of potato maybe, or a string of something. So for them, it was real suffering.
Surrounded by misery, Raphael Schechter realizes what will set them free isn't work, but music. He discovers an old piano in a barracks basement and resolves to take a risk of his own. His first recruit is a 21-year-old camp cook who shares his attic living space, Edgar Krause.
He assessed immediately that a prison mentality may sink in. So he encouraged us, after their assigned work was done, to come to the basement and sing, starting out with Czech popular songs.
At night, after long days at work, Schechter begins holding secret musical gatherings.
You forget where you are, you forget the surrounding. It was like if I was in a concert hall in Prague, and it didn't matter where it was.
This hour and a half or so shortened the time we had for brooding about our new lifestyle, and it did more. Next day at work, we already occupied our mind with looking forward to the evening to sing again.
Let's get settled, please, so we can begin. We all have a powerful emotional storehouse, and we don't necessarily have the language to get at the power of our feelings. When common language can no longer get even close to what it is we're feeling, that's when art begins.
Inside the walls of Terezin, Schechter and his fellow inmates unleash a flood of artistic creation. Musicians stage concerts of imprisoned Jewish composers Victor Ullmann and Gideon Klein. Pavel Haas and Hans Krause write all new musical compositions. Playwrights mount new productions, creating sets and costumes with whatever materials they can find. Terezin erupts into a thriving cultural center, an academy of prisoners.
The arrival of those artists who were willing to devote their talent to their and the inmates' benefit made all the difference. To give us that flicker of hope in that hopeless black monotony of the camp day after day.
all we lived with from the start in Terezin was the notion that in another 2 months, the war will be over, they close this gap, and we go home. So in the meantime, of course, there was such a surge of energy for the arts, which is quite normal if people are robbed of freedom. They want to be creative, and they were.
Scholars from every discipline give thousands of lectures to packed audiences about science, religion, psychology.
There were announcements, there were programs. So every night you could actually be part of that life, the artistic life in Terezin.
Throughout German-occupied Europe, Jews are forbidden to gather, play musical instruments, or venture out at night. But inside the walls of Terezin, the inmates find a strange artistic freedom.
The Germans knew full well that we are destined for death. So they thought, let them play music, let them play theater, let them dance. So we were dancing under the gallows.
By September 1942, the town built for 6,000 people is bursting with nearly 60,000 Jewish inmates from as far away as the Netherlands and Denmark. Typhus ravages the crowded ghetto. In a single year, nearly half the population will die. Bodies pile up in such numbers, the Nazis order the prisoners to build a crematorium, where against Jewish religious law, they're forced to incinerate their dead.
Death was a concept which we learned to live with. Death was omnipresent, it was everywhere.
September 1942. Hitler's final solution is killing Jews by the millions. The inmates of Terezin have no idea of the horrors outside their town's walls. But in January 1943, a new fear grips the ghetto: transports to the east.
The strange thing is that we did not know where the transports went. The word Auschwitz, we didn't know, we didn't hear. That was unknown.
As fear falls over the ghetto, Raphael Schechter turns to one of his few possessions from Prague: the score to Giuseppe Verdi's Requiem Mass. With one of the most powerful choral works in the world, he could hone his art into a weapon.
In his mind, he transformed it from the Mass for the dead into Mass for the dead Nazis. And he wanted to tell them about the day of wrath coming and the supreme judge sitting in judgment, and no sinner will escape. And he couldn't tell them in German, so he thought if he can sing it in Latin, he may get away with it.
By the time we were allowed to enter the special group of the people who were chosen for the Verdi Requiem, we had nothing but gratitude for Raffi in our hearts. We aimed to please him. And if anyone would have come in a few Nazis with a few guns and would have said, "Stop immediately and get out of this building, or I'll shoot you all," there wouldn't have been one that would have left the building.
In the basement of a concentration camp barracks, Raphael Schechter begins the mission of his life, piecing together one of the world's most demanding compositions with an amateur chorus of prisoners, learning each note in Latin by rote.
I had never in my life heard a requiem. I did not have any idea about the gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful music. I also didn't know more than 2 Latin words, and Rafi made very sure that he would exactly translate into Czech the meaning of the words. And Rafi told us the most important thing is how you feel when you sing this.
It's one of the most demanding choral works. Demanding not only musically, but emotionally. And if you read the text as though you were a prisoner, then it has a different meaning altogether. That this is defiance. And suddenly, the liberame, which literally means deliver me, O Lord, becomes liberate me, O Lord.
The liberame was liberate us from here. That was like a prayer that overcame hunger and occasional pains. You were there in that cellar and you were a different person.
I'm not so sure whether I was hard of hearing, but I think that my stomach stopped growling when I was singing. I think when you are more a soul than a person, I don't think the soul has to be nourished by anything but by heavenly music. The soul doesn't need anything else.
Well, my youngest son, who is named after Rafi, came to me and said, "We want to honor our father and Rafi Schechter by singing in Terezin." And he wanted it as a surprise for their father. And I said, at our age, I didn't want any big surprises. I don't know, maybe I'm silly. So once they came over for dinner, and Rafi and Danny brought their score, and they showed it to him and told him at that time, we are going to sing in the Requiem. It's emotional, but I'm very, very happy about it. And I'm looking forward to the performance and beautiful music. And we'll be all together, so that's good. They did not succeed, we survived.
By September 1943, Schechter fears his singers and he himself could be shipped out in days. So with a chorus of 150 inmates and a single piano, he leads their first performance of Verdi's Requiem.
It was tremendous, and I still don't understand it. There was only a piano, but for me it was like if the whole orchestra played. And it made us feel human.
These 2 hours, you are taken back into the beautiful world which was once your own. The world of the tunes and of the melody which we are just listening, and the message which was given to us by the performers. These were hours of pure joy, as much as you can call joy in camp.
This room became the protective walls of something good, something meaningful, something healing, and something that showed everyone who was really listening that Rafi had put all of us, the singers and the audience, into another world. This was not the world with the Nazis. This was our world.
For many in the chorus and the audience, Verdi's Requiem is the last music they will hear. The next morning, 5,000 inmates are loaded onto the transports. Raphael Schechter sees more than half of his chorus carried away in cattle cars. Spring 1944. After 2 years of living as prisoners, the inmates of Terezin receive orders to give their camp a makeover. Walls and sidewalks are scrubbed, gardens planted, and fake storefronts filled with goods from the inmates' own luggage.
My mother was supposed to make signs with oil paint that had an arrow, and it says, "To the library," "To the coffee house," "To the playground." She had no idea where this will go. That was used in Terezin for the commission to see that we had a coffee house, we had a bank, we had a playground, we had everything.
On June 23rd, the Nazis bring a delegation from the International Red Cross for a visit to what the Germans call a self-governed Jewish city. The inspection is commissioned by Nazi Lieutenant Colonel Adolf Eichmann and choreographed down to the last detail.
Nothing was not planned. Not a corner was omitted to make it convincing. They picked out inmates who knew how to play soccer. So they played soccer, and when the commission passed by, a goal was scored. The scenario was working to perfection.
The centerpiece of the Red Cross inspection will be a performance of the Verdi Requiem. Their cameras capture the only photo of Schechter and his diminished choir in rehearsal. The transports have cut Schechter's chorus down to 60 people, less than half its former size. But they now have the opportunity Schechter has dreamed of: to risk everything and confront the Nazis face to face and sing to them what they dare not say.
He had a great dilemma, Schechter. He was a stickler for perfection. He didn't like the composition of the chorus, but it was a tremendous challenge to have the Germans right there in front of him and tell them to their face.
The Germans would have known what was unfolding. If they would have known that Raphael was trying to tell them that they too will be judged one of these days for their crimes they committed on mankind, they would have really punished the artist.
Without Rafi, it wouldn't have happened. And we proved beyond the shadow of any doubt that yes, they have our bodies. Yes, we have no more names, we have numbers, but they don't have our soul, our mind, our being, our what we are cannot be taken away. Also, it won't be taken away at the moment we are shot.
The Dies Irae is, even as a listener, you feel is powerful. It represents a threat that you gladly would participate in as avenging whatever was done unto you. There was no applause, but I'm sure the Swiss people were impressed. And the Germans were aware that we were singing our own requiem, because they knew what they had in mind for us, whereas we did not.
Raphael Schechter and his 60 singers have delivered their message in the face of their captors. Now they cling to the possibility that the Red Cross will hear it.
We all have one very deep hope that some of the people, the Red Cross representatives, will ask a probing question. Because it was a beautifully quaint little town what they showed them. But they never really did. I think they wanted to believe what they saw.
So they came home to Switzerland and said the Jews have it very good. They play funny operas and children's operas. And the children play on beautiful swings and rocking horses. And in the afternoon, they have an afternoon nap in the grass. And when they wake up, they each get bread and butter. These are children who had never seen butter, except that day. Deception is not the right word. There must be worse words for that. If anybody would have come 2 weeks later, there was nothing left. Even the children's home was empty with the baby carriages. Small children, aged 3 to 6 or 8, was empty. There was no child left. The swings were gone, the playpens were gone, the rocking horses were gone, and the children were gone, all into the gas chambers. Oh, what these children do to anybody?
The Red Cross performance would be the choir's last.
After the visit of the International Red Cross, every able-bodied person was deported. 19,000 in 5 weeks. And I knew that my time would come very soon.
On October 15th, 1944, the transport is announced. Almost the entire choir will be sent to the east. This time, Raphael Schechter's name is also on the list. The next morning, Schechter and his choir are packed into cattle cars and transported to the hell of Auschwitz.
And so we were pushed into the cattle trucks. It was completely full. You could hardly breathe. And people didn't move, didn't talk very much. Everybody was thinking, where are we going? What's ahead of us? So here is Raphael Schechter with a tin of sardines, and he says to me, Zdenko, here is my dish, here is the bread, and here are the sardines. And that will be my last supper. As though he knew.
Upon arrival at Auschwitz, most of the chorus and musicians are sent directly to their deaths. And with them, an era of art and culture we will never know.
I really feel strongly this was to be the next generation of the great Czech composers, all wiped out on October 17th, 1944. In one day, in one moment, in a gas chamber in Auschwitz, that next generation of Czech composers, gone.
We went to Auschwitz with a transport of 1,500 men. And on the ramp of Auschwitz to Birkenau, which was the extermination camp, I have seen Raphael Schechter the last time.
Raphael Schechter would survive Auschwitz and 3 more concentration camps. In March 1945, he dies on a death march. 1 month later, liberation comes to Czechoslovakia.
I think the great lesson of Theresienstadt was, first of all, to see the highs and lows, the worst in man and the best.
In music, in acting, in conducting, in composing, if I ever lived in a most cultured and cultural surrounding, it was in Terezin, amongst these people.
It remembered to the time what we have been living through, and that somebody wished to help us. And that was Raphael Schechter and all the singers.
Raphael Schechter had influence, beneficial influence, on thousands of people who have to thank him for giving them a bearable memory of Terezin.
I'm not a Holocaust survivor as much as, a Requiem survivor. I didn't only survive the Requiem, I got it as a present to take with me all my life.
right, I'm going to introduce our speakers. First, I'd like to introduce the president and artistic director of Defiant Requiem, the foundation, Murray Sidlin. Murray is a conductor with a unique gift for engaging audiences, and he continues a diverse and distinctive musical career. He's the president and creative director of Defiant Requiem Foundation, an organization that sponsors live concert performances of Defiant Requiem, as well as other projects, including the documentary you just watched in this brief section, a new docudrama called Mass Appeal 1943, and he is also, in addition, he lectures extensively on the arts and the humanities as practiced by the prisoners in the Theresienstadt concentration camp. Our second speaker is the Director of Education for Defiant Requiem, and that is Alexandra Zapruder. Alexandra began her career as a member of the founding staff of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. A graduate of Smith College, she served on the curatorial team for the museum's exhibition for young visitors, Remember the Children, Daniel's Story, and she earned her educational master's in education at Harvard University in 1995. Alexandra actually spoke with us a couple of years back when we actually had her come on to speak about the salvaged pages. So with that, I would actually like to turn the control over to Murray. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure is mine. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fine. Good. Well, I would be very happy to address any questions, comments you'd like to share, or questions that you may have about elements of the documentary, if you have some questions.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? So I think they're still processing, Murray.
Okay.
It was a lot to take in. Here, I've got one. Here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. How is the choir composed of the people who participated?
When it was clear that we were going to go to actually make this film, I originally thought that the funds that I had raised would be sufficient to bring a choir from Prague, and there are several really outstanding choirs in Prague, and that would have been the most economical thing to do because it's only 35 miles. And then a number of students at Catholic University, where at the time I was the dean of the School of Music, mentioned to me that they knew so little about the Holocaust. They wanted to know more about especially since I had been working on the arts in the Holocaust era. And I thought to myself, for a few more bucks, maybe I can figure out a way to bring this choir, that is the Catholic University choir, since there was a real lack of understanding and information about that era. And I worked at it and managed to raise the money. So I brought 90 members of the Catholic University Choir. At the same time, I got a phone call from people I did not know who were members of the chorus of the New York City Opera. And they said that they had heard that I was taking a group to sing the Verdi Requiem in Terezin, and there are 5 sopranos, which I've come to call the divas, and the divas said, if we paid our own way, could we come and sing, since we all know the Verdi very well, and this would be a very meaningful, so forth and so on. So I took those 5 at their request. And then I got another call from choir members of the Buffalo Philharmonic Choir that they would like to come along. So there were about 10 of those. So altogether, that meant 90 from the Catholic University, 5 divas, and 5 more from Buffalo. So that's how that worked out. People got wind of it and decided to come along. I taught the kids at Catholic University. I made sure they knew it, But the others, the prerequisite was that they had sung it before and they knew the music, so they wouldn't have to come to all the rehearsals. That's how that worked out.
Here, we got one more question.
I heard that I heard Eufen Prepacek quite a few times. It's a very special song in my family. I was just wondering how you chose to use that in the film.
Yeah, well, good for you. Not very many people have been able to pinpoint that. For those who don't know that, that's the tune that was da 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 dum dee da 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 dum da 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 dee. Eufen Prippenchik brennt a fire, and so forth. It's a Yiddish folk song, and I needed something as an interconnector, something with Yiddish flavor. And I chose that one because it was my mother's favorite song.
So, would you mind sharing with us the origin story of Defiant Requiem?
You mean how it all came about?
Yeah, how did this all come about?
I was teaching at the University of Minnesota. I want to make sure that Alex shuts me down when it's her turn because I don't want to overstay my visit. Um, uh, I was teaching at the University of Minnesota, and I had just accepted a
Sorry to
position.
interrupt, Murray. I will, but you've got a full half hour.
Oh, fine.
Yeah, and tell the story as you always tell it because it's a wonderful story and everyone will appreciate it.
Okay.
So I'm
Okay.
here listening.
Okay. Thank you. Um, so I was getting ready to leave Minnesota. I was at the University of Minnesota for a job I had just gotten at the Oregon Symphony in Portland, and packing up the house and all that. You know how that goes. And so it was spring, and I was taking a walk, and I came across a bookstore in the area of Minneapolis called Uptown, and the bookstore was called the Bryn Mawr Books. And out in front of the bookstore was a very large table with a pyramid of, I guess, out of print or books they wanted to get rid of, or whatever it was. It was a pyramid. And I walked past, and listen, I can no more pass up a pyramid of books than you can. You know you know very well. You know you're laughing, but I know you. Every time you're not going to pass up a bookstore like that. So I looked at the pile, and there was one book about two-thirds of the way up that was just sticking out. And the way I felt about it, was this book was going like this. It was beckoning to me. And I thought, okay, I looked at my watch because I wanted to make sure that if I pulled this book out and the pile collapses, do I have enough time to pick up the books, which I would have to do? So I had an extra 10 minutes and I thought, okay, what the heck, I'll give it a try. So I reached in, took the book, pulled a little bit, and then I reached a point of no return and I went, bam, pulled it out. And I had the book in my hand, and the pile remained intact with that little opening there where the book had come. So I looked at the book. The title of the book was Music at Terezin. And I thought to myself, Terezin, where in the world isn't that someplace in the Czech Republic and someplace not too far from Prague? Whatever. So I opened to the table of contents, and it was a list of names. So music at Terezin and a list of names. I now know that the book was about people who had something to do with music making in that place, which I now remembered and read in the preface that it was a concentration camp. So I thought, well, let's take a little glance through this book, and I opened randomly to a very short chapter entitled Raphael Schechter. And I stood on the street corner and I read it. It was only a few pages. And it was biographical. You know, he was born in Romania. They lived near Bucharest. He did very well in school and in upper level of music education. He went, therefore, to he got a fellowship to go to the wonderful conservatory of Brno, which is the second largest city in the Czech Republic. He went there. He graduated with honors as a pianist, conductor, and composer. That's what they all studied in those days. Unless you're a string player, then that had to be added on. And so he comes back to Prague and he gets a job with a small opera company, and he starts to excel, and the larger opera companies have taken notice of him, and it looked like he was going to move along the path toward becoming a recognized and contributing member of the wonderful society, musical society in Prague, which was highly recognized as for its quality and its adventurous behavior. And Prague today is still a very adventurous musical city. War breaks out. Everything is off the books. All the Jews are tossed out of the universities as students and as professors, and that included the opera companies, where if you were an assistant, as he was, you were let go as well. And so it wasn't long after that that he and several thousand others were moved from the major cities in all of Europe toward camps, toward incarceration. So he found himself in Terezin, and his job was not musical. That's what they did if there was time, and if there was a kind of leader, the commandant of the camp. There were three during his time, and two of them did not want any extra activity. Just do the work, eat what we give you, which was, less than gruel in the strictest definition of that. And that's it. You work, you ingest your gruel, and you go off to work, and you die. And they bring in others and so forth. So, but there came a time when the third commandant took over the camp. He was approached by the Council of Jewish Elders. They'd like to do some performances, they'd like to do some concerts, they'd like to do some presentations. And ultimately that was permitted by the third commandant, whose name was Ram, R-A-H-M. Ultimately, they gave over 1,000 concerts in Terezin. They gave some 2,400 lectures on every conceivable subject, 300 lectures on literature alone. And there was a group of musicians that organized something called the New Music Studio. Now, let me say this for a second. You folks live in Orlando. I would imagine that there is a new music studio in Orlando. I know there are a couple here in Washington. There are 5 or so in New York. There are 8 or so in Los Angeles and Cleveland and Chicago and Cincinnati. Wherever there is an active urban arts society, you will find the new music this, or the new drama, the new theater, the new visual arts. You'll find those things. But in a concentration camp? A new music studio in a concentration camp? Are you kidding me? No, I'm not. And there were about 20 composers. And they went to work and they got their music played. Well, it was permitted by that time to do it, as long as there was nothing that was, how shall I say, negative from the Nazi point of view, then it was permitted. And so a lot of music became written. And in addition to that, a lot of traditional music became performed. And it was about a year or so into all this that Schechter decided, Raphael Schechter, you know what? Why don't we try to do something that's going to make our mark, that we can identify ourselves in a very significant way as artists and people who use art as inspiration. So he decided he was going to try to put together performances of the Verdi Requiem, but he had no music, he had no score. He had one score that he had brought with him. Why did he bring a score to the Verdi Requiem, to this place to which he was deported from Prague? And nobody knew where it was. And once they got there, nobody had ever heard of it before. But he brought with him the score to the Verdi Requiem because, frankly, I think it's because he decided that if at night or during the day, if he had any time, just to open the score, to look at it, and to be deeply moved and touched by it, because it's music that meant a great deal to him. And so he would get inspiration from just looking at the music, just looking at the score, singing it to himself, or hearing it in his mind's, hearing it in his thoughts. And so at some point he decided, let's put together a chorus and let's see what happens. So he assembled a chorus of about 150 singers. And he started having rehearsals in the following way. There was a piano in the basement of this camp, and he would bring men who auditioned for him, and he accepted. So he would bring the group of men, tenors and basses, down to the basement one evening. This is after working 10, 11, 12-hour shifts. And he would start pounding out notes on the keyboard and getting them acquainted with the requiem. And so he would do that for one night. And the next night, he would do that with the women's voices, the sopranos and the altos. And then the third night, he would put it together. Maybe he only taught about 10, 12, 15 bars, not much. But this was going to take some time because nobody had a score. It didn't matter because if they had scores, most of them didn't read music anyway. This is for just to pound out the parts. Just pound out these 6 bars. Now sing it back. Now pound out these 6 bars. Now sing it back. And little by little by little, he was able to teach them the entirety of the Requiem Mass by Giuseppe Verdi. Truly one of the great masterpieces of all performed classical music. And that goes for today as well. I would say that the Verdi Requiem is certainly one of the most performed compositions. Anybody know what is the most performed religious composition? Any thoughts? You'll have to speak up. I, I still can't hear
Handel's Messiah.
Yes, I would say the Messiah by Handel is probably the most performed. And I would say that somewhere between the Mozart Requiem and the Verdi Requiem is number 2. And so this was a work that he wanted to do because he loved it. It's as simple as that. He brought 2 scores with him when he came to the camp, which is also an interesting piece of information. How do you select from all the music he had in his studio, shelves and shelves and shelves of great music? And you can't take too much because these scores are heavy, and you're only allowed to bring, 100 pounds, 105 pounds. And anytime you put in things extra, like music or even cans of delicacies, then you may be taking up room and weight that belongs to an extra sweater or pair of shoes or something of that nature. But at any rate, he brought two scores with him, the Verdi Requiem, and the other score was the opera by uh, Smetana called The Bartered Bride. I don't know if you know that work, but it's really the Czech opera. I'm sure it's performed in the Czech Republic, oh, maybe 10, 12 times a year. Because there are a lot of opera companies and everybody does the Bartered Bride because it's very popular. People pay to come and see it. And so it has a place in the history, in the culture of the people. And it's a folk opera. It's got a lot of folk music. It's got humor. It's got a love story. It's passionate and beautiful. So everybody loves the opera. And he thought he brought that with him because he didn't know it yet. He was Romanian. He would have to learn it, but he also knew if he ever got out of that place that it's the one opera that's performed 10 or 12 times a year. No doubt he would have a chance to perform it if he could walk into the opera house and say, by the way, I know this work. Let me be one of the people that you're going to take a look at because I know this work. So he started work on the Verdi Requiem, and ultimately they gave 16 performances, but not without controversy. Not without controversy. This was a work of the Catholic liturgy. And there were a number of people, including a group called the Council of Jewish Elders. Were they a governing council? Well, they were an advising council. But whenever the Nazis came to the council, this was the reason they existed. The Nazis would come to them and say, we need to deport 1,000 people by next Friday, have those names posted by Wednesday morning. And that's the way it went. This council of elders got instructions from the Nazis uh, as to deportations. Just choose the names at random and post them. Why did the Nazis do that? So that people can't blame the Nazis for the deportations. You're taking my family. The Nazis' response was, we're not taking your family. We said to the council, you will find some people that need to go and we'll post their names. And that was their doing, not ours. So that's the sickening, heartbreaking, sadistic way in which the Nazis operated. So this council also tried to look out for ways in which they could not necessarily improve life, that didn't seem to be possible, but not to make things worse. And their attitude was, oh my God, we have so many Orthodox Jews in this camp, including rabbis, who were going to scream bloody murder over the fact that here during the hours when we're supposed to be enjoying ourselves and getting some relief, here they're inflicting upon us a work of the Catholic liturgy. And it looks as though it's a concert, but it's a Catholic service parading as a concert. So this was a big brouhaha. And the conductor Schechter was called in, and they read him the riot act. You will discontinue this. And his point was, look, the meaning of any great work of art is never limited to its original intent. You are identifying this work as a Catholic work of the Catholic liturgy. We don't. We identify it as a work of deep, powerful beauty. This is really extraordinary beauty. And we think that people are going to enjoy it and they're going to be enriched by it. They're going to be fulfilled by it. Well, it turned out, it's a long story and I won't go into it now but at some point, stop me on the street someplace and I'll tell you the entire story. But they actually did perform the Verdi Requiem the first time, and then it became the hottest ticket in Terezin. Tickets were not sold, but tickets had to be issued so that they had, just enough people for just the chairs that they had. So there were 16 performances altogether of the Verdi Requiem. 16 performances in three different choirs. After the first choir sing, there was deportation. With deportation comes importation. So they brought in more people, and Schechter began teaching the Requiem again. But this time he had about a third of the choir left, and so it was going to be easier to teach it this time because there were people who already knew it. So that's basically the story of how the Verdi Requiem got to be the signature of the music that was performed at Terezin. But I wanted to go back just for a second to the new music studio. There were really quite a number of wonderful compositions that were performed, that is, composed and performed. And people came to these things. You would think now today, if you go to any concert of new music in any city, you'll see that the audiences are generally small. New music is not the favorite way a lot of people like to spend their evenings. Some people do, people who love great music and who are themselves invested in new music. They will come, they will attend, they will come to performances like this. But in the concentration camp, the seats were full. They were full. It was a wonderful, wonderful way of saying, that there is a future. If we invest in, how should we say, if we come to the concerts which present new music by the composers who are our fellow prisoners, then this is a way of saying that there is a future. And this gave some hope and some faith to audiences that life will go on. It's as simple as that. It's why they did it. It's why they came.
Hey,
There,
Murray?
there were about 20 composers who were of great significance. Now, it took a long time, we have a fair amount of their music. We have it. And we have to perform it for one reason only. Not to perform it would be to murder them a second time. Who rang out just a minute ago?
I did. It was me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Murray, can I ask you to, with the few minutes that you have left, can you, and people may have more questions, but will you tell them the story about Edgar and sort of how you tracked down the story of Raphael Schechter?
Yeah. When I saw this book and I saw the last paragraph in it, it said, and they gave 16 performances of the Verdi Requiem. And I thought to myself, nonsense. Come on, this is an extremely difficult work. It will be impossible for them to. I mean, I can't believe it. I just didn't believe it. But I bought the book for a couple of bucks. You know how it is. You go to these places, you pick up this book, you're sure it's a first edition Shakespeare for $3. So I bought this book and I carried it with me and I went to Portland, Oregon, which was my new job. And I fell in with a couple of people who were at this university where I was lecturing once a week. And they were Holocaust scholars. And I said, I don't believe this. I'd like to prove it one way or the other. If it's true, I want to do something about it and let people know about it. But if it's not true, which was my instinct, then we've got to stop it. We don't want information that is spread that is simply not true. The people who are Holocaust deniers are standing by waiting for such an opportunity. So one thing led to the other, and I met a couple of guys there who were advisors about how to find Holocaust websites. Ultimately, to speed this up a little bit, I came across a response to my inquiry. My inquiry was, do you know of any people who sang in the choir at Terezin, Verdi Requiem, studied the score under Raphael Schechter, and were able to participate in the presentations? I got one response ultimately from Schechter's niece, who was living in Jerusalem. She's still there. I'm in touch with her every now and then. And her response was, "What do you want them for?" So I showed this to my coaches, the guys who I met at this small college, and they said, "Yeah, this is a good question. They're asking, what do you want them for? Because they think that you're trying to make money off of these people and so forth. So just answer them that you don't know, but that you're looking for proof positive, one way or the other. Yes, they did sing the Verdi Requiem, and there were X number of performances, or no, my uncle was there, and we're relatively certain that this did not happen, since he is getting the credit for it." Well, it turns out that the credit was well positioned, that this was the family of Raphael Schechter. And so she, that is the niece, pointed me in the direction of someone who they thought was a good friend of Schechter in the camp. Well, it turned out to be a good friend. So they said that his objectives were that if he ever got out of this place, that he would like to go to Israel, possibly New York. He's got relatives in Boston who are in the catering business, and since he had studied cooking, that maybe this would be a way to get started in his new life. Well, one thing led to the other, and I decided Boston was the last place they mentioned. Let's try. And so I called area 617. I'm looking for, oh, they mentioned that his name was Krasa, Krasa, and it's a common Czech name, so don't get excited. It may be more difficult to find than you think. So anyway, I called the area operator. I'm looking for Krasa, so forth and so on. And they said, well, we have an E, initial E Krasa in Newton, Mass. So I called the number she gave me, and the conversation went something like this. Hello. And I thought, right accent and the right age. Is this Mr. Krasa? Yes, Mr. Krasa, please don't hang up. I need to ask you a question, and then I promise I'll never bother you again. I just would love to know one quick question. Does the name Raphael Schechter mean anything to you? And there's a pause, and then he said, well, I named my second son after him. And I started to, I don't know if you know the word schwitz, but I started to break out into perspiration. The Yiddish word is schwitz. And I said, may I assume, Mr. Krause, that you were interned in Terezin? And he says, yes, I was there for more than 2 years. And Rafi Schechter was my roommate, my bunkmate. So can you imagine? The schwitz was now double, triple. So I said, and this was on a Tuesday, and this was the week from hell for me. And I said, because I had concerts to conduct in Portland, and but I said to him, if I came to Boston this Friday, may I take you to lunch? So he said, well, I think so. I think that works out fine. And then he yelled into the phone into the next room to his wife, Hannah, I just want a free lunch. So I went to Boston, and he came to my hotel, and I had arranged for us to have a table, but he says, no, Hannah was at home waiting for us for lunch. Can you imagine? I mean, I mean, I'm a serial killer. He doesn't know that. You know, I mean, I was, you know, just a complete stranger. But he puts me into his car. He takes me to his home, and I spent 6 hours there with Edgar and Hannah. And little by little, the story came out. He put me on the phone to Marianka. She was in the film. She was the one who had the voice like this with very curly gray hair. She only passed away about a year or so ago. Marianka, and then it was Ava Rocek, who was in the film. They put me on the phone to her, and Vera Schiff, who was in the film, and she died just about 6 months ago, living in Toronto. And so all these people, you know, they put me in touch with them, and apparently the way it works, according to the guys who were in my coaches at the college, that once they understand that you're not there to make money off of them and that you're interested in the story, to tell the story or to help them tell the story, then you'll hear the gates clang shut behind you. You're in their world, and they will take you in, and then they will give you everything that they possibly can to help you illuminate their story. And so Edgar was the first person that I came across who was there. You saw him quite frequently in the film. He had the big voice like this, and a sweetheart of a man. And his younger son of the two is named Rafi, and that's really how it all got started. Thanks to him, who put me in touch with several other people. That's how I was able to put the story together.
Thank you so much, Murray. Is there one more quick question before we shift gears? I don't know if anybody has anything that they desperately want to ask, but if so, feel free.
I think we've got one question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. So my question is, with your experience with um, receiving art or being around art that's been created by people that are in extreme suffering, and then also using art to inspire people to either have a will to live or just like, kind of come out of this. How do you use art, or is there having watched people make art, how would you use art to kind of soften hearts and create empathy and create awareness and teach people, how to connect with other people so that these things never happen again?
There isn't enough time. I don't mean today. I mean in my life. There just isn't enough time. I I can only do what I know and what I feel I must be done. Let me assure you, first of all, I am not a scholar. I'm a messenger. It's my role to tell people about these people. The thing about terrorism that is so important to everybody to understand, terrorism represents the intertwining of cultural miracles. That is, the intertwining with the more common state of insanity, chaos, and wholesale murder. I'll do it one more time. Terrorism is the intertwining of cultural miracles with the more common state of insanity, chaos, and wholesale murder. All we can do is have faith in the art and have faith that if you present it and if you get people to encircle and to be a participant, then maybe we're making some progress. but I don't want to pretend that I'm a psychologist or a physician. I'm simply a messenger. That's what I do. I tell you what happened and hope that you will be inspired. You know, there was a wonderful pianist in the camp by the name of Alice Hertz Sommer. Why was she so important? She was the oldest living until she died a couple of years ago. She died at 111. She was the oldest Holocaust survivor, not terrorism survivor, Holocaust survivor. Someone once asked her, and I saw this on film, why they made music at Terezin, specifically why she made music at Terezin. And she said, because the music prevented hatred. Think about that. She knew that storing hatred and practicing hate would kill her. Don't we all know that? So she said she made music because it prevented hatred. Edith Steiner Krauss, who was another pianist in the camp, said that when she performed her concerts for fellow prisoners, she remembered why she became a musician. So everybody has a different reason for doing what they did. And my objective, my life is now spent illuminating all these various reasons of why they did what they did. And that's it. That's the best I can do. I hope that all of you in this room today will be in some way motivated or inspired to bring this to the attention of your kids, your families, whoever will listen to you. Just force them to listen to you.
Thank you so much, Murray. That's a perfect.
Thanks for having me. All the best.
Thanks, Murray. I always have the unfortunate job of going after Murray, which I have to say is really not ideal because you're so amazing, Murray. Hi, everybody. I'm Alexandra Zapruder. I am the education director of the Defiant Requiem Foundation. And before we wrap up in the next 20 minutes, I wanted to just give you a little bit of a windshield tour of the educational materials that we have created to teach this story. So I'm going to share my screen in a minute, but just sort of by way of an overview. So we have materials that we have created at Defiant Requiem that help tell the story of Defiant Requiem in a number of different contexts. So for English language arts, social studies, and art and music teachers. And we continue to develop more materials, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then we have some partnerships that we've developed, and we have been able to create even more materials for people who want to take an even deeper dive into, in particular, the life of Theresienstadt. So that's the sort of overview that I'm going to try to provide in the time that I have with you this morning. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second just to make sure that everything is up where it's supposed to be. Our education fellow Michaela Procopio is on as well, and she's going to put the links to all of these materials and websites into the chat as I'm speaking. And then we can also provide them to Stephen if he doesn't have them to provide to those of you who are here in person. So
provided, so Alex, I put the links to the site, and with the code that you gave me as well to be able to go to the site, which
oh,
should be
great.
in the pre-work.
Okay, fantastic. So what you should be seeing on your screen right now, and if you can verify, are you seeing our education website? You've got Marianka there?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. I can't see you all now because my screen is sharing. So this is our education website. And here we're about to do a little updating of it. But here you can see there are 4 modules, which is basically the equivalent of a unit that can be anywhere from 1 to 3 class periods. So there's 4 different ones. There are 2 for social studies. Actually, I'll scroll down here because it's prettier. So social studies 1 is the Holocaust and creative resistance, and this is the most elementary level one. That is, if you have students who are not particularly familiar with the Holocaust or with Theresienstadt, this is a good place to start. All 4 of the modules center on the film that you just watched. The second one is a little bit of a deeper dive into propaganda and deception, and the idea of Terezin as a model ghetto, the Red Cross visit, the function of propaganda, the way in which the Germans used propaganda to try to deceive the Red Cross as to what was really happening to the Jews, and the sort of moral and ethical questions that this raises. Then we have elements of rhetoric. So oh, that's actually not how it's supposed to look. The reading the libretto in 3 contexts. This is the ELA module. And this one is great for English language arts teachers. It takes a look at 2 movements of the Verdi Requiem, the Liberame and the Dies Irae, so the Day of Wrath and Deliver Me, and looks at how the language of those 2 movements can be understood differently in 3 different contexts. So one is the way that the language, the Latin Mass, like what the meaning of those words in the context of the original Latin Mass, then what those same words mean when a group of Jews are singing these words to another group of Jews in the context of Terezin and imprisonment, and then again a third time what those words mean when those same Jews are singing those words to the Nazis and the International Red Cross. And so the activities there are around considering how audience, speaker, context all shape meaning. And then finally, we have Resisting Oppression, the Arts and Creativity in Terezin, which is really for art and music teachers and looks at other works of creativity in other contexts where there's been war or genocide, or other cultural environments where people have used the arts as a form of cultural and creative resistance. So I'm just going to very briefly show you what these modules look like. You have to have a passcode to get in. We provided that passcode. It's my strong preference that you register for access to the website when you go to it, because that way, not only will you have access to all the materials, but also you'll get access to information about our programs and new materials that we're developing, and you'll essentially be on our website, on our mailing list. And we don't send a lot of mail, but we do like to stay in touch with people. We do like to know who's using our content. So this is what the website lessons look like. Every one of them follows the same pattern. They are essential questions, which are really kind of bigger theoretical questions that we hope that students will engage with in the course of doing this lesson. There's an objective, there's standards alignment for those of you who may want to use that. You can always download the module. So if you don't want to use it on a web-based method, you can download it in the form of a PDF. Then there's a getting started section, which helps you understand how this particular module might align with what you're doing in social studies, English language arts, or art and music. We also have some pre-teaching recommendations. These are important. Again, if your students are totally new to this subject, you may want to use some of this supporting material to kind of get them up to speed, or if you want to, if they've already studied the Holocaust generally, but they don't know very much about the ghettos, or if they've already studied kind of generally about ghettos, but they don't really know terrazine, et cetera. These are all resources to help you get them primed to do this particular lesson. And then we have a glossary. Then every lesson has, or every module has quick history facts, which just give you as a teacher a kind of cheat sheet so that if you get asked a question, you have an easy set of answers to it, because we know that, you know, it can be intimidating when if you're not very versed in this history, you know that your students may ask a question that you're not prepared to answer. So we try to anticipate what those questions might be. And then all the rest of it is pretty straightforward. Lesson materials, everything is accessible right here on the site, and a lesson sequence. Now we know that, and this particular one has 3 parts. Now we know that, you know, teachers may do the lesson exactly as it's designed. They may not do the lesson exactly as it's designed. You may decide to look at all the lessons and combine a couple of things together. You might want to see if let's say you're a history teacher and a social studies teacher, you might want to see if an English language arts teacher wants to do something jointly with you, and combine modules. So they're all designed to be as flexible as possible. And as I said, they all really start with the documentary film. It's the centerpiece for each and every one of these lessons, the one that you just watched. And so you're able to watch it for free online, or if you want to get a DVD, you can always ask us for that, and we're happy to provide it. There are a couple of other materials that I want to share with you. Again, I'm going to share my screen. Let's just make sure that I have what I need here. So, for those of you who, you know, we know that some teachers may, I'm going to come to questions. So just hold your questions and I will circle back around. Thank you so much. So we know that some teachers might not have the time to do an entire module of the, 3 parts, or even one part of the 3 parts. So we've also created just a very straightforward, very simple teacher discussion guide for the film. So if all you can do, or if all you can do in the first year is show the 45-minute version of the film and have a discussion with your students, we provided these prompts for conversation. So part of it is history, part of it is Raphael Schechter and the singing of the Requiem, and part of it includes quotations by Edgar Kraza and making meaning of the Requiem. And all of these questions are either the answers are provided in the film itself or in the quick history facts, or they're open-ended questions that allow you to simply engage with your students. There's no right or wrong. For example, how did singing the Requiem contribute to the overall life and well-being of prisoners? There's no right or wrong answer to that. But the idea is simply to engage your students and give you some support in engaging them in dialogue about this. And we also have quotes. All the quotes from the film by the survivors are here in this document. So another option is, you ask your students to watch the film either together or watch it in class together. And then maybe you ask each student to choose a single quote by a survivor and either orally respond or write a response. So again, we're trying to make these materials as accessible as we possibly can for you. And then we have a series of lessons that we did in partnership with the Leo Baeck Institute in New York. Now, these are more broadly about terrazine, less specifically about the Verdi Requiem. There's one that's about transit, that really looks at the idea of Terezin as a transit camp. What does it mean to study and consider the larger picture of the Nazi genocidal plan for the Jews and how they moved people from home to place to place to place, ultimately to intended extermination, so to speak, intended murder. And, what is the role of Terezin in that context? We also have another lesson about propaganda that you can use to deepen what you are doing on propaganda if you want to take our propaganda lesson and this propaganda lesson and look at it together. And this one really goes even more broadly into broader ideas about propaganda, which we know are just so incredibly important right at this moment, where the media literacy is such an important topic, and there's so much disinformation and misinformation, and the internet has completely changed the way that information is presented. And so, we are hearing more and more from teachers that this particular story can be a very effective lens through which you can start to discuss broader questions about propaganda and the use of propaganda, and how agenda-driven narratives shape our understanding of knowledge, not only in the past, but also in the present. We also have a lesson on intellectual resistance, which is related to cultural resistance, but this is particularly about the idea of reading and writing, about the lectures that were given in Terezin, 2,500 of them over the course of the life in Terezin, and also the library that existed there. And then finally, a lesson about children, in particular, the lives of young people and how young people survived what was particular to them as compared to the adult experience. So all of this material is available and accessible through the website and through the links that Michaela will provide. And we encourage you, as you explore these lessons, to reach out to us. If there's something that you want to do and you don't see what you need, we're a small team. At the moment, we're a team of 2, me and Michaela, and the end of June, we'll be a team of 1 again. But I do my best to respond and to be available to teachers as much as possible. We do offer programs. A lot of them are virtual. We do, programs like this fairly often. And the last thing I'll say before just opening it up, if there are some questions, is that, it's really our goal to inspire you and your students to really think about the role of cultural resistance. What does it mean to use art and music as a form of resistance in the Holocaust and in the present day? And so that's what all the materials are for. And we continue to develop new things. We are going to be working on materials for middle school and for upper elementary. We are working on a music performance module for teachers of band and orchestra and chorus, so that you can, music teachers out there can actually teach their students to perform part of the Requiem Mass with an overlay of learning about Defiant Requiem. And, we're always open to new ideas, and we're always open to new partnerships. So if there's somebody who wants to do something with this material that we haven't done, we're always open to hearing about that. So with that, we don't have too much time left. I'm going to just quickly peruse the chat. I know that there was at least one question. What about the sciences? So we have not really done anything with science. And if if as a science teacher, you have an idea about something that would be a fit, we'd certainly love to hear from you. We definitely have an emphasis on the humanities. That's sort of the obvious place for us to be. But I have seen teachers, I've seen math teachers, for example, do things with the Holocaust around like the weighing and measuring of food, that kind of thing. And so I think we're very open to that. So, just reach out to us if you've got an idea of something that you'd like to develop and test out in your classroom. And if it's something that works and we can incorporate it in our materials, we would love to do that. Let's see. Yes, I have a date for the upper elementary and middle school program, but I cannot remember at this exact moment what it is. Do you have it, Michaela? Okay, Michaela, can you just put it in the chat? It's going to be an online program, and my brain can actually only do one thing at a time. So, are there other questions that I can answer for people about our educational materials?
Anybody here in person? Questions? I've got one hand coming up.
Excellent.
I'm just asking to clarify, you said that you hadn't done anything with middle school yet. So you do not recommend that we use some of these materials or even just scaffold them a little bit for a little bit lower?
Yes, you absolutely can use them. You absolutely can scaffold them. And in fact, the module, the Terezin lesson on children, I think it's children is the one that, Michaela, is that right? Was it the one on children that we thought was sort of very suitable for middle grades?
Yes, yep. The Leo Beck Institute on Children is very adaptable for middle grades. And then in conjunction to that, I just put in the chat for everybody that we are doing an event on Tuesday, October 29th in the evening, where we will introduce curriculum around Defiant Requiem that is appropriate and targeted specifically for upper elementary and middle school curriculum.
Yeah, we've got 2 teachers who have done amazing work with even with upper elementary, but like using the documentary film, but showing it like 5 or 6 minutes at a time over a 10-week period, and really having amazing discussions with kids. So she's going to come on and talk about what she did, and then we have this wonderful educator from Cape Cod who is developing a middle school curriculum on Terezin, in particular on cultural resistance. Resistance, resilience, and let's see, resistance something and resilience. I can't remember what the third word is. And she will be presenting in the end, as Michaela said, in the end of October. But I would say don't be dissuaded. We created these materials for high school, but they absolutely can be scaffolded for middle school. And and actually one of the things that I think is great about Defiant Requiem is that it's very it really lends itself to middle school because there's not a lot in it that is graphic, or it's truthful, and it points to the bigger story of genocide, but it, I think, is emotionally pretty safe. And it's also in a lot of ways, it's an empowering story. And so as a point of entry, as a way to begin, one of the things that we've learned and over the many, many decades of teaching about the Holocaust to young people, if there's a way to help young people understand what happened during the Holocaust truthfully, but also give them a sense of agency, that people were not completely, not all people were completely and entirely stripped of their humanity. I think that is useful, and it's beneficial because it makes it a little more accessible for our young people. And then as they get older, they can begin to grapple with, the really darkest parts of this history, where you really are up against, a reality that is very bleak and that doesn't have much hope in it. But I don't think that's where we want to start, if that makes sense. Music teachers. What would be a simplified chord or string of notes students can code 5 to 7 steps of a melody? Doing so could open curriculum up for music, math, and science for a cross-curricular approach to lesson planning. That's a great question. We do have a flex score for I believe it's the Dies Irae, which is the cornerstone of our developing of the music module that we're developing. I can't share it yet because we haven't published that yet, but I think, that is a good question. And what I would say is, if somebody wanted to answer this question or develop something, I would ask you to run it by Murray before you share it with anybody, just because he's our music person and our artistic director. I'm not a musician. I wouldn't know how to, evaluate that. But I think that could be a worthwhile thing to investigate. Are there any final questions before? I know that was really fast. It's always kind of a challenge because, we really want you to hear from Murray, you know, from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And he's got the story and he tells it so well. But we also want you to know what's available to you in the way of education. So I hope that this gives you a sense and that you'll look at the materials and explore them. And if you can't find something, or you want something, or you need something, or you're interested, just please reach out. We are always happy to answer questions and to support in any way that we can.
Fantastic. I don't think, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alexandra.
Sign off.
Thank you so much for your time. Thanks, everybody. We are going to take a break here. Alexandra, I will see you in New York.
I'll see you in New York. Looking forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Everyone else who's online, we're going to, this is not going to be an interactive lunch. We're going to let everyone in here eat. You guys can go take a break, and then we will be back exactly at 1 o'clock. Tomorrow, what we're going to do is we are going to have two lunch sessions on Wednesday and Thursday that we're actually going to do something. And that is one, actually Thursday, Rabbi Kay has agreed to come in for the hour from the Interfaith Council. So that should make it people, we get to have some good questions. And and tomorrow we're going to watch I'm Still Here, which is in connection with the salvage pages that Ms. Patel was talking about yesterday. So we'll have a little video. So everyone enjoy your lunch. And if you got any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We are going to stop the video. We're going to stop right now the recording, and we will see everyone back here at 1 o'clock.